Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, called in Hebrew Beth-Zata, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many ill, blind, lame, and paralyzed people. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The ill man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool. And when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now, that day was a Sabbath.
I'm standing up here because I'm short. So we are still in the liturgical year calendar, and you might know that not all preachers preach from this, but there is a calendar. It's a 3-year calendar that is used by many people that preach in Christian churches. And there are texts that are laid out. And part of the idea is to hit sort of main points and hit points that have to do with the season that you happen to be in. And Mike is mostly preaching from this calendar. And so we're continuing that. And this passage that we have today from John is the passage from the lectionary for today. This season that we're in still, even though your eggs might be long put away and there's no more, I think I might have given Kathy's last bunny rabbit back to her that she had out over at Patricia's place, but it is still Easter in the church. We're still in this Easter season. And the Easter texts lead into another season coming up, the season of Pentecost. And Easter is a season when we're still sort of remembering and celebrating who Jesus was in his ministry and the legacy of that ministry that he left for us, for those that follow Jesus. This passage that we hear today from the Gospel of John is a very interesting passage to me for a number of reasons. And what I want to do is I just want to give us some context to understand this passage and what's going on in it, because I think it's a difficult passage for us to really get. There are so many references to things that we might not know anything about. We do not live in the world that Jesus lived in. So a lot of these references are lost on us. So we start off with this pool by the sheep gate, as it's explained, which is a part of it's within the complex of the Jewish temple. And this is a place that was an actual place. In fact, you may have seen, if you're a follower of biblical archaeology, like I happen to be, I'm really interested in biblical archaeology, but they have just been doing a bunch of recent archaeology around this very pool and this sheep gate. So it's an actual place that existed. And there were these porticos, and there were, in fact, many people that would bring those that were ill to this pool that was supposed to have these healing waters, if you could get close enough to it. Now, there's a tricky thing about this pool, and this is mentioned in some versions of the Bible, but it's mentioned by other writers who are outside of the Bible, but who write about this pool. So, and you see this in that picture that's on your bulletin. The idea is that this pool had this water, this healing water, but for the water to do its thing, it had to be stirred up by the wings of an angel. The plot thickens. So yes, there had to be this angel. The angel stirred up the water. While the water was stirred up, you couldn't miss it. That's when you had to be put in the pool. So that's how the story of this pool worked. So imagine now that this particular passage is about a man who's been ill for 38 years. And in Jesus' day, what that's telling us, he's been ill his entire life. He has spent the whole of his life being chronically ill. Now, that's another piece of information that gives us more information if we were an early hearer of this passage, because to be chronically ill for your whole life within this understanding, within a culture that believed in purity laws, a culture that was very concerned with sorting out those that were clean and those that were unclean, to be chronically ill for the whole of your lifespan didn't just mean that you were sick. It meant that you were a cast-off from society. You would not be allowed to interact with society. So it's kind of ironic because there's this healing pool, and yet this man would not have been taken to this Jewish healing pool in the temple because he was chronically ill, because he was an outsider. He was ritually impure. So we might say that in Jesus' day, illness was not so much a physical ailment, but it was really more of a societal marker that you could have. Your illness meant that you were left out. You were estranged from family. You were estranged from society. Chronic illness always had this impact. So we hear these stories throughout the Bible of people that were blind, people that were lame. One that's always near and dear to my heart, I have epilepsy. People that were labeled as being demonically possessed because they had epilepsy, and so they were cast out of society. Let me give you a few more categories here. If you had leprosy, if you were a woman who was menstruating, if you had any kind of a severe illness or infected wound, any of these things could place you in the ritually unclean category. So far, as you listen to this list, is there anybody left in this room who I have not named? Is there anybody? If there is, just give me a little wave here. Boy, we moved through this quickly this time. Let me give you a few more categories in case you're still in the A list, right? Okay. Your sexuality, if you're not cis. If you might have eaten shellfish, if you're planning on a pork barbecue for Memorial Day weekend. And here's one of my favorites, and I think Jonathan is an infractor right here. If you have mixed fibers in your clothing, you definitely have some mixed fibers going, honey. You're out. You're out. Mixed fibers put you into the impure list. So this man, along with many people in this society, had been labeled as being unclean. And Jesus asks him a question. He is lying there on this mat, and he's been there for a long time, and it might seem like kind of a ridiculous question. Jesus asks him, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made well? And so the man responds, he says that he doesn't have anybody who can put him in the pool. But even before that, we learn a few more things about his situation. One thing that we learn in this is that Jesus saw him. The word for see here is a special Greek word. It's not a word that just means, Jesus glanced or recognized him. This is a word, this word to see, is a word that means that Jesus took the time to deeply see and to know and to understand the life circumstance of this particular man. It's a word that in a way means that you have an ability to slow yourself down enough, to find the comma, to slow down enough, to really be present to the situation of another person and to take the time and to have the dignity and the decency to fully understand the situation of a different person. So he's able to understand the hopelessness and the difficulty and the challenge and the condemnation of this person's stand, of this person's situation. Jesus can comprehend him. And then the second part of that same sentence, there's another thing that Jesus is able to do. The word here is gnosis, and it's a word that means to really know, to completely get the situation at hand. And this gnosis in the Gospel of John and at this time was really seen as an almost sacred knowing. It was the type of knowing that God could have of people, that people, if they followed this way, could possibly have of one another and of God. So it's a knowing beyond just, I know it's a Sunday. It's a deeper kind of knowledge that's being explained here or described here. So then Jesus does another thing that to me is really perhaps the most extraordinary part of this passage of all. He has seen this man, he knows him, he has an idea of what he wants, but he doesn't make any assumptions about that. He doesn't decide what to do about this man. He doesn't decide, poof, which is sometimes how it seems with Jesus in these miracle stories. It's like, poof, he makes something miraculous happen. He actually decides to treat this man as being worthy of dignity and of respect. So much respect that the man can make his own choice. The man can make his own choice about what's going to happen to him next. So he gives this man the possibility of making his own choice, his own decision. Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be restored into this society? Do you want to come back and live in community? These are all the questions that Jesus is asking, but these are all of the questions that are being asked of this early Christian community. Do you want to start creating a world in which people that we've been leaving out for a long time suddenly have a place? They have a place at this table, and they are being invited back into the fold, and we've left them out for a very long time. Do you want to be restored? Do you want to be made well? This is what's at stake in this passage. And so then what we hear, and again here, we can't quite get at the feel of it, then there is sort of a poof moment. All at once, immediately, to haste, forthwith, this man is able to act on his own with some freedom, with some dignity, with some movement. He picks up his own mat, this thing that has been the tool of other people hauling him around, taking him to different places, doing different things with him. He picks up his own mat, and in this process of making his own decision, picking up his own mat, he is a restored person. He is restored. He is made whole, and he is made into a person that can not just move down into the pool, which kind of doesn't matter anymore, because he's a whole person who can be himself. But that's not the end of the story. There's a little tagline on this story that brings us back to the comma and back to Sunday. Now that day was a Sabbath. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Sabbath is a day that is about returning, renewing, reorienting. It is about, for the Jewish faith, it is a day of returning to the beginning of creation, to the wholeness and the goodness of, creation. It's a status where things are well, where things are good, where things are made whole once again. And one of the understandings of how this happened within the faith tradition, and mind you, the community of John is a Jewish Christian community. It's an early Jewish Christian community. So they're not having an argument with people outside of themselves. They're, in a sense, having an argument with and amongst themselves about how do we create this great restoration of Sabbath. And the way that they had learned to create this restoration of Sabbath was through following laws, kind of like the blue laws in Massachusetts, enforced laws about how to behave and what to do, and mostly what not to do on the Sabbath. This is how the Sabbath was observed. So rather than really being a day of rest and relaxation, it might have been that, but it was done with some very strict regulations around it. So what Jesus does is to say, absolutely not. That's not all that the Sabbath is about. The Sabbath is a day of the restoration of our community. It is a day of reaching out and restoring the whole of creation. And in the whole of creation, everybody has a place at the table. Everybody is a part of this. Everybody can make it down to the waters and to the pool. Everybody, and only everybody altogether, can truly be the people of God. That's the only way that we can really restore the goodness of the creation, is by again and again looking at the place where somebody's being left out, somebody's excluded, and bringing this back together into a whole. So that's nice. Cool. But how do we do that? Because we live in the same situation. This is an old story. But when we look around our world and our country right now, we know that this is a story that plays out again and again, even right now. Who's being left out? Who's being cast out? Who doesn't have the rights of other people? How does all of this play out in our society? Things only change when people make a decision sometimes to stir things up. Sometimes the only way for anything to change is to stir things up. And I want to give you just one stirring up example that I just read about today, and I think we should do this as a group project, just saying. So you might know that Harvard is having a discussion, an argument with the Trump administration about being able to enroll international students, and the step before that had to do with them following diversity, equity principles, inclusion principles within the university. And so the administration is trying to ban them from admitting international students. And I think for anybody who's been at WSU, we know that our international students at Washington State University are a huge part of what makes Pullman a wonderful and dynamic place to live. And I can tell you this is absolutely true at Harvard as well. The international students at Harvard are a huge part of this community. And so Harvard just today posted that they have created, and I think this is Harvard stirring things up. They have posted that they are going to be teaching a free online harvard.edu continuing education course. It is called We the People. And We the People is a class that, as they say in this description, how can a country founded more than 200 years ago on the ideals of liberty, equality, and individualism still struggle to empower all of its citizens equally. So it's a deep dive into history and how we got to the place where we are and how we go back to some of these original principles. So Harvard, through the tool of education, which it's pretty well known for, is going to try to stir things up a little bit. Stirring things up. Jesus shows up, he looks around, and he stirs things up. He inspires a victim and an outsider to get up. Don't just stay there, get up and stir things up. He invites us not to sit on the sidelines, but to get up and to stir things up, to be a part of this great stirring that orients humanity toward justice, that orients us toward compassion, that orients us toward hope. He invites us to stir things up, and so let's dive in.